I had the zchus to have my father-in-law sleep over for a week when my mother-in-law went to Argentina this year. And whenever she goes out of town, she likes bringing a present, a ruchniistic present. So the last time she went, she gave me a beautiful pair of tzitzis as akar satayv. And this time she gave me Rabbi Spero's book, A Touch of Tehillim. It's a beautiful book, loaded with great stories. And I'd like to share with you a few of them now. Rabbi Spero tells over about a great Rav who was the head rabbi of I hear some clicking. If we could stop the clicking, excuse me, in the back. I hear clicking coming from this direction. The story goes that Hagon had Tzaddik Harav Rafal Baruch Toledano was the head rabbi of Morocco. My father, Rav Schwadron, said when you looked at him, you felt it was a Malach Hashem, and his face literally shined with the Shekhinah. I saw pictures, I know what he means. It turns out Rabbi Toledano tried spreading Torah, and he even wrote over the Shulchan Aruch in a kitzur form. He wrote a kitzur Shulchan Aruch, not the one the Ashkenazim have from Rabbi Gansvi. He wrote another one, and there's actually different ones, kitzur Shulchan Aruch, but it says Rabbi Toledano. He's the one who made the famous song Ashore Shira Lechora Torah. So now, what happened was, he heard that in Algeria, which was near Morocco, which was not far from his community where he was the Rav, there was a lot of Jewish children who were going to public school. Now, public school, they say, has gotten worse and worse. You know, someone joked that 50 years ago, they said the 5 worst problems in public school. And then 50 years later, they wrote the 5 worst problems in public school. You can't imagine the difference. 50 years ago, the 5 worst things I think were talking, chewing gum in class, talking, coming late. It was like 5 things that we wouldn't consider. Oh, garbage on the floor. And then today, 50 years later, they said it was guns, it was alcoholism, it was
tobacco. Stabbing the teachers, that's why they go like that. They write backwards.
Other things, immorality, and basically drugs. It's a whole different world. But anyway, the Chafetz Chaim says it's sakana if a person goes to public school, because in public school they're not teaching them about Hashem and the Torah and mitzvot, and then they end up learning from the goyim and chas v'shalom, maybe even assimilating with the goyim. So Rabbi Toledano decided, he heard that not so far from Morocco, in Algeria, which is a neighboring country, that there was no yeshiva. So he went with his friend, and he said, we're going to travel there, even though it was difficult traveling, and we're going to gather the people of the community together, and we're going to address them and tell them how important it is to have yeshivot, to educate the children, teach them the Torah. But although it was a beautiful speech and it was very heartwarming, they said to him, Rabbi, we're sorry, but there's not enough money to open a yeshiva. Yeshiva is expensive to run, get good yeshivas, get good maintenance, good cooks. And the community felt that there was no way they would be able to have a yeshiva. So Rabbi Toledano started to cry. And as he started to cry, they thought they insulted him. They see the rabbi crying. They said, Chacham, why are you crying? We're sorry, we didn't mean to insult you. We're just saying the honest truth. We don't have enough people to fund the yeshiva. Yeshiva costs so much money. He said, I'm not crying that you insulted me. I'm crying that it must be I don't fear Hashem enough. Because the Gemara says somebody who fears Hashem, people will listen to him. The Gemara says, Yarei Shamayim Divarav Nishma'im. So if you're not listening to me, to open a yeshiva, it must be my own fault. It must be that I'm not God-fearing enough. Because if I was, he would listen to me. When they saw him crying, and they saw him, please give a double minus to these two boys. Double minus.
Also him.
They were so shaken up that they said to him, we promise we'll open the yeshiva. And I don't know what happened to the end of the yeshiva, but I don't know if it's still going or how long it lasted. But it seems that his words were mashpi on them, and they opened the yeshiva. And we see from here that a person should always say, Devarim hayotzi min halev, nichnasim el halev. If you speak to a person from your heart, especially when the person sees you're sincere, you could actually cause the person to improve and to change, to become a better person.
He's throwing papers at me. Yeah, he threw it at me. I almost choked him. He threw right when I was telling him to stop. So that means I'm a good boy. I get a check and he gets a little money.
Okay. I apologize for the rude interruption. Let's continue. He brings another story in the Sefer that there was a very rich man who was from the wealthiest Jews in history. There are stories of his philanthropy, how he was a philanthropist. A philanthropist is someone who's a gevir, he's very rich, and he uses his money to benefit many people. He was a tremendous benefactor. He helped Jews in Israel and around the world, and his name was synonymous with chesed and with tzedakah. When it was coming his time to leave the world, and he was able to sense that his days were numbered, he wrote a special will to his children, allocating his money, who's going to get what. And he made a very strange request from his children. He told his children, I want you to bury me with my socks on. So when the children read the letter after they found the letter after he died, they couldn't understand, why would Daddy leave such a letter in an envelope that opened it up after I died? Please bury me in my socks. Now we have a halacha that when a person's buried, he's not wearing socks, he's wearing just tachrichin and a talit. A person is buried in a white gown made out of linen, and everyone has the same tachrichin. This is a takana Rabbi Gamliel made, because it used to be people who are rich would be buried in gold, silks, and beautiful garments, and the poor were buried in shmatas. The family didn't have anything to give him, and then it was very embarrassing for the met. So he said, from now on, everyone has to be buried in the same white gown. As a matter of fact, Ashkenazim wear that kittel, that white gown, on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Hoshana Rabbah, and by the Pesach Seder, to remind themselves on these awesome days, to remind them that this world is temporary, and there comes a time where everyone has to die, and everyone has to go under the ground, and a person will think twice about doing Avirot, because he knows that one day it's going to stand in Din V'Cheshbon. So what happened was, they got the letter that he wanted to be buried in socks, and they took it to their rabbi, and they said, Chacham, we have a strange request. Our father wrote that he wants to be buried with socks on his feet, and we know the halacha is that the dead person is not buried in socks. So the rabbi said, I don't know why he made such a request, but you can't honor it, even though there's a concept mitzvah lishmoa divrei hamet, that it's respectful and it's proper to listen to the will of someone who died, but we can't honor that request when it goes against the Shulchan Aruch. And since the halacha is not to be buried in a clothes other than the kittel, you can't say, well, I want to wear gloves and a hat and a scarf and shoes. No, there's no socks, no shoes, so we're not going to listen. So it turns out they buried him And shortly after the funeral, they found another letter that was left from the father who died, the rich man, the wealthy man who died. And in it said, by now I'm sure you've returned from the funeral, and I'm sure you asked a rabbi if I can be buried with my socks, my favorite socks that I like, and everyone has their favorite clothes. And he said, and I'm sure you listened to the rabbi and you didn't bury me with my socks. Now you're probably wondering why I made such a weird request to be buried in my socks. And I'll tell you the answer. I was afraid that you, my children, might get used to all my money and after a while start becoming balei gava, arrogant people with egos that, we have so much money, we're so great. And you might start thinking that the main thing is to enjoy the wealth. So I wanted to show you with my own personal example that when you leave this world, you don't take anything but your good deeds. The only thing that's going to escort you to the next world is your mitzvot and your maasim tovim, and not even your clothes, not even your socks. So I taught this lesson to you, just so you should remember, don't get carried away in the pleasures of this world and the luxuries of this world, enjoying it, because the time will come when the only thing that you'll be able to take with you is the tahrichin, not your socks. You can't take the socks with you. And there's a saying by the Goyim that there's no U-Haul connected to the hearse. A hearse is the black station wagon that is used in funerals to put the coffin of the person inside it and to take him to the cemetery. So there's a saying, there's no U-Hauls connected to the hearse, which means the hearse. I think it's pronounced hearse. There's no U-Haul. No one's taking to the cemetery.
Can you say that?
Yeah, in the U-Haul.
I thought they believed that you should get buried in your car.
Someone's kicking my desk, and that's definitely not good for the recording. Okay, another great story from the book Touch of Till. There was a story with Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Akiva Eiger was a tremendous Talmid Chacham from the Gaonim of Klal Yisrael around the world. Great Torah scholars tried to delve into his books, where he asked questions from one part of the Torah and another, and he was from the greatest geniuses of all time, greatest tzaddikim of all time. He lived about 180 years ago. It turns out Rabbi Akiva Eiger was visiting a certain town. Okay, if you throw another thing, or even if I hear you did, you're going to go straight to the Ben Sama. There's no reason that you have to do that.
I will clean it up.
Okay, now, Rabbi Akiva Eiger went to a town, and he heard that in that town there was a Jew who had a very rare disease. And when someone has a rare disease, Rahman al-Islam, it's a double sadness. Any disease is sad, but for some diseases, people know the cure. As a matter of fact, the Gemara says that before Hashem created any disease, He already created the cure for the disease. Sometimes scientists or doctors discover the cure and they can help people. But sometimes there are certain diseases they don't know the cure. So that man was stricken with a very rare disease, and people didn't know what to do and how long he would live. Rabbi Akiva Eiger heard that at that time the king's physician was in town, and the king's doctor was in town, and he knew that the emperor, the king, who had a doctor, must have a very smart doctor, because he has to be able to keep the king healthy. In the olden days, kings had their own private doctor who would always check up their health to make sure that nothing is going to ruin the health of the leader. And Akiva Eiger sent a message, a delegation, asking this doctor if he could kindly please see that Jewish patient